This is a typical Western teenager from the 90s. He plays basketball. He's a fan of Chicago Bulls, Sayer Maxoff and Michael Jordan. He studies at a prestigious school in Switzerland, goes to Disneyland, speaks several languages. Classmates know him by the name associated with 7 achievements and values of Western civilization. And behold, humble and educated, he becomes the leader of a small country. He promises and improve the lives of ordinary people. Organizes grand construction projects, and the world learns his real name, Kim Jong-un. And his real achievements are that he creates a reliable nuclear defense for his country and unlimited power for himself, for which he is ready for anything. Everything, deal with his own uncle and any opposition, close the borders like none of his predecessors, stifle any information about the Western world where he essentially grew up and was raised. And today, North Korea is a territory of absolute death, of secrecy. It's almost impossible to escape from there, but the paradox is that those who do this are still proud of their homeland, even if they are afraid and run away. Why does a country constantly under sanctions and sometimes just unable to feed its own population create nuclear weapons? Why didn't DPRK collapse like the Soviet Union or regimes of Eastern Europe? But he did not let Western capitalists in like Italy, their Yatnaga. And most importantly, how Kim Jong-un manages to hold power that 25 million North Koreans no longer remember, that their country was ruled by someone other than the Kim dynasty. So, North Korea, or more correctly, the Korean People's Democratic Republic exists. And it's already 5 years more than the single mighty one lasted.
Subtitle editor Asinetskaya, corrector Aegorova.
But notice, in the USSR itself, 7 people managed to run the country, and they were about no one. And in North Korea during this time, only 3 are in power. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un. And as you can easily guess, they are relatives by surname, grandfather, father, and son. That is, North Korea is not about communism, not about the power of the people, and not even about the power of the party. It's about the personal regime of one particular person. And somehow, it has been holding a country of millions for these 75 years under control. How do they manage that? Rewinding exactly 70 years back, here's how American planes, without sparing bombs, leveled the capital of the DPRK, Pyongyang, to the ground.
900 tons of defense fall on the track. 20 square kilometers before the bombing signal. Mission accomplished.
Agreed, these figures, 900 tons per 20 square miles, are generally unclear whether it's much or little. On TV, all right, loads. For these 3 years of the Korean War, specifically 200,000 Buddha statues will land on Hinian, about 1 for each cabinet. And this not-so-young man, Curtis Lee May, when he commands the strategic forces of the US Air Force, reports that he has been remodeled. Pilots torched every house in North Korea, then they will still complain to the management that they have no more targets. But rightly so, in addition to houses, they also blew up all the dams, rivers, flooded fields, and destroyed the North Korean harvest. And now the viewers are familiar with the history. Wait, Kolya, North Korea is the one to first attack South Korea. If not for the American troops, Kim Il-sung would have simply taken over the entire Korean peninsula with his army. You're right. Those who are not aware, a very brief summary of events. Korea was divided into 2 parts after the Second World War. Communists in the north, pro-American Democrats in the south. Comrade, on June 25th, 1950, DPRK troops invade the south. They capture 90% of it, except for this little piece of land near the port. American troops, along with the UN, helped the Southerners to stand up, launch a counter-offensive, and almost take the North themselves, putting everything in its place with airstrikes. We don't need American imperialists right next door. They are deploying aviation troops from the DPRK. In 51, the war is returning where it came from. Drawing lines at the nanoscale, which they sketched out at the 38th fragment, and by 1953, the sides finally give out and sign the threat to change. And from that moment until today, there are 2 countries on the map, North and South Korea. The latter is actively supported by the United States. They help
with money, technologies, and protection. And North Korea is fed by the same from China and the Soviet Union. Here. The country is ruled by Kim Il-sung alone. But he does not simply transform himself from a wartime leader into a great leader, for example, a Stalin. Korean propaganda elevates him to the nation's son and practically makes, as a god of North Korea, somehow he has it. Just think. Remember, I started with how American airplanes burned the entire country, and its residents naturally hid from the bombings underground. You'll agree that doesn't seem like a victory. Why won't he name it? Kim Jong-un does just that. Here on the ruins of his own capital, he holds a military parade and celebrates victory in the domestic no-deliberating war, which he himself started on his neighbor. But no worries. The Soviet Union is here, ready to pay generous aid from friendly communist countries to Korea. Engineers, architects, consultants in all areas of public life. They are restoring the DPRK, and it is developing even faster than its southern neighbor. The authority of the cybernet is growing. And while a new spacious city is growing, which by the way, look, is very similar to East Berlin, to Moscow. This is the Pyongyang TV tower. This is Berlin, and here is Ostankino. Go ahead, great. Importantly, this model urban socialist paradise arises in a country where until recently 80% were peasants. Of course, they are surprised and happy. And under this patriotic noise, Kim Il-sung deals with any opposition. He forms his own cult of personality, the cult of the father of the nation. Here is a key point that propaganda at all times in any country uses with great pleasure. It's about caring for children. Well, for your understanding, Pyongyang would lose about 1 million people in the Korean War. When your population is only 10 million, that's a lot. Just imagine how many orphans are left.
Children always suffer more. They never know what's happening or why. And how can you explain to them after they saw their entire family killed?
What does Kim Il-sung do? He orders the construction of orphanages and schools for child martyrs for the homeland. They feed, clothe, take care of, provide education, but at the same time, they raise them in the belief that they are now related. Father, it's Kirill himself. A bright example is the Mangyeon, the school for the orphans of revolutionaries. It will open where Kim Il-sung was born, and its graduates will become the future elite of the armed forces and the security services. That is, the leader strategically cultivates those he will become to rely on. Today, Today, the North Korean regime also relies on information technology. Just 10 years ago, at the beginning of Kim Jong-un's reign, Seoul recorded 1.5 million cyber attack attempts from North Korea every hour. So, that is 17 attempts per second. In the 16th and 17th years, the North Korean guys will clean up the global cryptocurrency exchanges for over $1 billion. Well, it's clear that even such a country like in North Korea, there are no illiterate IT specialists. Now, take a closer look at these propaganda paintings, mosaics, statues. In them, Kim Il-sung is not only a father, but also a loving mother. Look how tenderly he embraces children, wounded soldiers, peasants, and old people to his ample chest. It's not by chance. These values are the foundation of any religion, cult, or sect. It tries to replace itself. A family. I think it's a coincidence, or did I make that up? Well, look, Kim Il-sung's father was a school teacher, and his mother was the daughter of a school principal. They were also active followers of Christianity. In Eastern Korea, right? Detail number 2. Kim Il-sung idolized Joseph Stalin. And do you know who he looked up to when he was young? And then what did he do? He established a frankly religious personality cult in a godless country named myself. I'm not trying to say right now that all the children of teachers and priests turn into Stalins and Kim Il-sungs. Both comrades clearly understand that strictly. And I want to hint to you what this ideal dictatorship consists of. Well, let's continue to figure out why on earth the state tries to substitute itself. Family. What is a family? Care. That's Kim Il-sung. He takes care of everyone. But family is also about safety. That's when the topic of the nuclear sparrow comes up, or rather, the desire to confuse it. Back again to the cruel American bombings. It wasn't the worst case scenario. A tougher option from the US to drop not hundreds of thousands of bombs on Pyongyang. A few nuclear warheads, as they did at the end of World War II. Fields, you've probably heard about the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And here's what they looked like after a single explosion.
The commercial museum was also 0.2 kilometers from the ground, and the wall that stood in front of the bomb was turned to the left, due to the pressure of the explosion.
By the way, these very American nuclear threats essentially stopped the Korean War. What does Kim Il-sung do? He perfectly understands that the Americans can really do the same thing with him at any moment as with Japan. As the just ended war shows, allies are not always quickly awaited. So it sends its scientists here to Dubna near Moscow for training and knowledge to the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research.
This is where employees of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research live and work. Scientists from Albania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Vietnam, Democratic Republics of Germany and Korea.
And in 1964, already in North Korea and Yongbyon, with the help of the USSR, they established their nuclear research center and even installed a Soviet reactor there, but it's not a bomb yet. And Moscow is not in a hurry to transfer technologies. Because 2 years earlier, in '62, the Cuban crisis happened. First, the Americans placed their nuclear missiles in Turkey. The USSR did not like this, of course. It was too close to their own borders, and they retaliated by placing missiles in Cuba. And the states don't like it. They're blockading the island, and for 2 weeks, the whole world is waiting for the start of a nuclear war between the USSR and the USA. But President Kennedy and Secretary General Khrushchev are negotiating. The Soviets are dismantling their missiles from Cuba in exchange for the Americans not invading Fidel. And they will remove their nuclear warheads from prison. The deal went through, the war didn't start, everyone's fine except for DPRK. Because there you finally understand that the USSR is without problems. In the interest of its own security, it can betray an ally. You can't wait for help, you have to develop nuclear and any other weapons yourself. Please, the share of North Korea's national budget for the military-industrial complex is increasing insignificantly. There, by 3.5% in 1956, percentage 1966, and what's happening next? The rescued people of North Korea
knows how to count and can literally.
He defended the country, won the war, united the people, somehow fed them. There was hunger and disease, and now there are hospitals and clinics on every corner. Well, goodbye. At least in Hinayana. A century ago. But further, everything will go not easy. The USSR will collapse, China will go west, help will be reduced, Kim Il-sung will die, and the terrible famine of the 90s will begin. But even under such crappy circumstances, the Kims will remain in power. How? Just a bit aside now. There are plenty of myths around North Korea, well, that people are still there. The culprits are allegedly shot from rocket guns for watching banned movies. The more monstrous the lie, the easier it is for me. Hard to believe it. And if you add these strange videos where people cry, they cry at the appearance of leaders, applaud like robots, that's when you start to believe in any nonsense. DPRK. But in reality, the Kim regime is very calculating, otherwise it would not have lasted so long. Look, in the 90s, when there will be terrible hunger in the country, and most Koreans will look mainly, you can't exactly expect support like this from the deceased USSR or half-capitalistic China. In the end, the UN will start sending humanitarian war to the country, assistance. And the main donors of this story will be North Korea's main enemies, the US and South Korea. But even this is not enough. And the North Korean government is forced to ease up and allow some private target. Improvised markets are emerging, smuggling is actively developing. As they say, the salvation of the tillers is in the hands of the tillers themselves, or everyone's for themselves. State factories are getting up, but guys go to work because they have to, but they earn diddly squat. And the main entrepreneurs become their wives. Because according to Korean traditions, they should actually stay at home raising children. But since it's already necessary to save the children from hunger, they go into trade and private business. It starts to grow, but going too much is dangerous. The regime may collapse as it happened in the USSR. Kim is making a wise move. To maintain his power, he relies on the military and declares the Jong-un policy. Army comes first. There are two reasons for that. Firstly, there are more military personnel in the GDR than even in Russia. Despite the fact that North Korea's population is 5 times smaller and its territory is 142 times smaller, if these military guys live poorly, they will be unhappy. And since they always have a strong argument of weapons, they can overthrow the regime. There's a second reason. Ayer only comes to power after his father's death, and he needs to establish his own authority. The army doesn't really respect him. No, not because he walks on high heels or wears glasses like Liza Minnelli. And then he even wins in the top 25 men who look like old lesbians rating. Just that Kim Jong-un never had real military experience like his father. Before he became a national leader, he was with propaganda, not war. And so that the military don't eat him, along with the crumbled Soviet canned meat. He must have lost his mind. Power unit and give them more opportunities to increase the defense budget, make the military first in line when subsidies are distributed, money or food. Well, Kim keeps a clear calculation for himself why the money is something like a super expensive nuclear program. And this is a way to avoid participation, for example, Gaddafi. For those unaware, there was a leader, a dictator of a country called Libya. When civil war broke out in the country, NATO troops intervened and Gaddafi was smoothly killed. The moral of this story is, if you are without nuclear protection, you can get an invasion and overthrow at any moment. Well, it's clear that Kim Jong-un is not going to launch nuclear weapons first today. That's suicide. The American response will come 100%. But to have a stockpile of nuclear missiles that can reach Washington, that's an argument for Washington not to interfere in the affairs of North America. As it is said, there is no better defense than a hydrogen bomb and a means of delivery. Well, the second argument, as always, is a propagandist. Their own country's people are disappointed, well, right now. He declares, "Look how strong and developed a state we have become under my leadership. We threatened the US itself." In general, there is a universal theory whereby any power can maintain itself indefinitely if it has 3 strong pillars. The first one, But simple people like it. For the people, North Korea has propaganda that tells grandiose tales about great leaders. North Korea is surrounded by enemies on all sides, and they know their leader knows how to protect it. Second, a military city. High military ranks are important. They should live well. And we Turks are no fools. Remember the numbers for military expenditures, nuclear weapon development, and so on, purely of military privilege. And the third pillar, big business, should stand up for power. You'll say, stop, this is North Korea.
What a mess, Oleg.
Well, here's what. During Kim Jong-il's time, when the screws were loosened, a new class of people began to form. They are now called Tonju, the rulers. Money, higher officials of the Labor Party, or those same military leaders. Those who run state-owned companies in Korea, or those who do business abroad. These are the officials who try to attract investment in North Korea or earn foreign currency. Security service officers, and those very married women who might not work for the state, but as it turns out, can engage in private trade. And today, all these guys have enough money to feel comfortable, and it's not about North Korean won, that's a currency. These people earn and spend such normal hostile American dollars. You look at this and you realize that Kim Jong-un is using a classic scheme described in his books by Niccolo Machiavelli. Don't worry about the people as a whole, but win them over to your side. A small group of select individuals, and roughly 1% of the population in North Korea lives very well. They drive normal cars. 3 countries rest at normal resorts. Yes, the last Kim built ski slopes, all sorts of sports entertainment. Even Western clothes began to flow into the country. If not a river, then a decent stream. And here these comrades cling to Kim's power because it gives them what they need. A specific example is the auto industry of DPRK. North Koreans tried to make copies of various Western and Chinese cars, and imagine that you are the owner of such a factory and you are well, and you can make a good profit on this. Remember, like in the USSR, someone would bribe to get a car faster than someone else or better.
Claims are completely unfounded. The queue has collapsed and we started to record a new queue in January.
And imagine this iron curtain falls. What will happen to your factory? Will it compete with South Korea's Hyundai or the Chinese? Remind me what happened to Zeal or Hungarian Icarus after the collapse of the Soviet Union. After all, they were published in millions of copies and were everywhere.
Now over 200,000 cars come off the SIV assembly lines every year.
In other words, the Kim regime for such people is a guarantee of their decent lifestyle. And Kim needs them because they fund and support his regime. Here's an example. Everyone mocks the state company Air Koryo. It flies on old Ilyushins and it's generally the worst carrier in the world without stars, having only 1 flight a day. But that's how it is. They only own a taxi service, a network of gas stations and a travel agency within the country. They produce cigarettes and canned food under their own brand. And all this is authorized from above. Such a private-public partnership, where the government removes the hassle of production, logistics and sales, but still controls and takes a portion of the money. And it grabs so well. Hold on a second. Lukashenko has 33 kimchi residences at South Korean intelligence in North Korea. In the 28, there are railway stations. Subscribe. Residences are surrounded by several fences, connected by underground tunnels. Naturally, there are lips. People can hide from any hit. And now take a look at this clip. In 2018, the well-known developer, also the 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump, shows it to Kim at a personal meeting. What's the point? Comrade Kim, we're ready to offer you and your country all the opportunities of our investments in capitalism. We'll pump in so much money that your Pyongyang will be no worse than mine. Do you want it to be like in China or Vietnam? The Communist Party maintains political power, but the economy is purely on capitalist rails. Or let's do it like in Japan. They're the 3rd economy in the world. We control them too. But there's constitutional monarchy. Here is the emperor. You will be roughly the same. The video. Just without those missiles, okay? Tempting offer. And most importantly, many agreed, even those who had nuclear weapons. But Kim Jong-un already has all this luxury, and he understands the guarantees perfectly well. Its preservation is that very nuclear weapon, and refusal from it gives no guarantees at all. Multi-billion business sharks will eat him and his system in a matter of years. Kim Chun-in himself, born in 1982, was old enough, 9 years old after all, to remember the collapse of the USSR and the communist regimes of Eastern Europe. Plus, he was educated in Switzerland and understands Western values and layouts from the inside. Remember, I was saying that young Kim, he's a fan of basketball and the Chicago Bulls. So when he first came to power, few in the States understood what to expect from a fat guy with a strange haircut. And in the Obama administration, they'll want to build bridges and set up such basketball diplomacy. There was an option to send Michael Jordan himself to North Korea, but he refused. Diplomats excuse that he's supposedly afraid of flying.
One of the most iconic images of Air Jordan.
Especially on such airlines. And yet a person who always agreed to any extreme insanity will agree. Dennis Ron. And in the end, he drives Hinian away not once, but several times, not just leaving. Throw the ball into the hoop, but also personally hang out with Kim and even sing him a happy birthday. And all this basketball diplomacy certainly helps. Well, the world sees that Americans aren't shot on North Korean soil upon arrival, and North Koreans play basketball quite well. But in reality, for both sides, it's just a PR show for the domestic audience. You see, after several rounds, the world of friendship gone between Kim and Rodman ends. Because her sincerity was absolutely zero. Why does anyone need a country's leader and the country itself, which is at the very bottom in all sorts of rankings? Is she so attractive or what? Well, just the threat that needs to be definitely eliminated. Kim Jong-un and his predecessors, for themselves personally, in order to stay on the throne, do everything right. They eliminated all competitors within the countries. They invented an ideology that works, equipped with effective nuclear protection, and formed a circle of people who are vitally interested in them remaining in power. And all of this corresponds to the iconic phrase, let a few get rich first. Who said it? Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese leader who launched grand economic reforms. And essentially, thanks to him, China embarked on the path of a leading world economy. But truthfully, this phrase has a second part that many people forget about. Let a few get rich first, and gradually everyone should get rich. But the talent of the ideal dictator, on the contrary, is unacceptable. Without him, without the ruler, those who have money will always be scared of becoming poor. And for those who have no money, they can't be allowed to starve to death, but they can't be allowed to get rich either, otherwise they'll learn too much and claim their rights. Power. So that you don't have the feeling that I'm making up all my stories. I watch a lot of different information on the internet, and I also love to read books. And specifically while writing on North Korea, these two works helped me out. Diana Fifield's the great successor and the traitor of North Korea. I recommend. I want to give them away probably with my notes. I will buy new ones and send them to you. For this, please write in the comments how you think an ordinary person who does not have access should behave in such countries. To power, what's the best survival strategy? And win. For the most interesting comments, the ones that I like the most are these two books. But if you like the content, don't forget to respond with likes and shares. And you can support me by becoming a channel sponsor on platforms like Boosty and Patreon. Well, on to the future.